complaining to, okay, yeah. So I was a bit complaining to Helen that presentation was not live, so she offered me to stand here and only now I see what I signed up for. But I'm really excited to tell you more about my master thesis, so I also hope that I represent your work in a good way. So let's get into it. My master thesis focuses on the subjects of Fomo and social media use in adolescents. First of all, I want to know from you if you know the concept of Fomo, and if you do, please raise your hand. Okay, I see answers like no. But a lot of you already know what it is, but I will dive into it a bit deeper. So FOMO is short for the fear of missing out, and that's the desire to stay continually connected with what others are doing and feeling actually very worried that they have a good time without you. And an example for it is that you have to work while your friends are having a party and they have a really good time without you. Or that you were not invited to go to the cinema with some friends and you hear a lot of good stories about their nice way to the cinema. So that can feel a bit shitty. And it can also have problematic outcomes on internalizing behavior for adolescents especially, like less self-acceptance, less self-esteem, but also social media addiction. And that's also why I went into that. But first, the statistics about FOMO in adolescents in general, because 34% of adolescents actually experience FOMO at one point in their lifetime, which is 1/3, and in my opinion, that's a lot. So social media use and FOMO has a strong correlation. With more social media use is correlated with more FOMO. So it's really interesting to dive deeper into it, and especially in different uses of social media. And Helen already called out two of them, active and passive social media use, in which passive social media use is mostly browsing and seeing influencers. And active social media use as chatting, posting, or reacting. And I'm a bit curious how that's with your own social media use behavior. Because can you raise your hand if you do mostly passive social media use? I see a lot of hands. Okay, so that's already a lot. And what about active social media use? Can you raise your hand if you do a lot of posting, reacting? Okay. Not as many hands as passive social media use. Okay, that's actually pretty interesting because in adolescents it's a bit different because 93% of all adolescents use social media. And it's actually a pretty high number, so it's really interesting to see how that has an effect or correlation with FOMO. My research question in particular focused on passive and active social media use and how that's related to FOMO from 10 to 18 years old, and if that was moderated by gender. And first of all, the hypothesis that I put up was that passive social media use actually increased FOMO, and active social media use decreased FOMO. And I'm going to explain you why I thought about this. And it was because passive social media use, there was a lot of studies that focused on social comparison, and Helen briefly said that. Because social comparison is when people are browsing social media and actually see that others are having a very good life, because who is posting the negative side of life on Instagram, for example. It's all positive, all with a smile, and people might think that they're not having such a good time as someone else, which reduces a feeling of belonging and increases a feeling of FOMO. Whereas active social media use is having contact with other people, which reduces the feeling of belonging and hopefully decreases the feeling of FOMO. But the role of gender in it is also very interesting to look at because I think, or I thought, because I already know the results, is that girls will experience more FOMO than boys. And I thought about that because social interactions are actually different for boys and girls, in which girls value social agents more than boys do in the age of the adolescence. And that in general, girls have higher social skills in general. And, and that girls are also do more social comparisons than boys. So with that in mind, I thought that girls would have a higher sense of FOMO when they use social media passively, whereas the FOMO would decrease when they actively use social media because they have more interactions with others. So I used the data from Helen, in which I did my research on 41 students between the age of 10 and 18 years old, with a mean age of 13.5. Half of them were girls and half of them did gymnasium education, which is pretty high. And I analyzed data with multiple regression and SPSS, and I know everyone already knows what SPSS is. So the results were quite interesting and contradictive than the hypothesis that I put up. First of all, there was no correlation with passive social media use and FOMO, but there was a positive relationship between active social media use and FOMO. We also saw that girls were experiencing more FOMO than boys did, but there was no moderation in the direct effect. And it was quite interesting because it did not really match the hypothesis that I put up in the first place. So it was really interesting to see, like, how can it be explained? And first of all, when we look at the lack of correlation between passive social media use and FOMO, we can look at the passive social media use hypothesis, which states that passive social media use is more likely to create negative well-beings in adolescents. But Fomo and colleagues did a research on this, and they challenged it, and they stated that there are a lot of individual factors that contribute to the outcome of passive social media use. And so they found that people select media in response to psychological, social, and situational factors, which can highly differ between individuals. And that different media have different effects on individuals itself. So there's a really high variation, which also explains the lack of passive social media use in FOMO in general. So yeah, there's no relationship in there. But when we look at the explanation of positive correlation from active social media use and FOMO, we can look at what's already known by everyone, the corona pandemic. Because FOMO is a feeling that can highly vary over time and is not continually present. So you can feel FOMO 1 hour and the next hour it can be gone. Or maybe it's from day to day or week to week. But with corona, it's really a situational factor that can influence this feeling. The data collection was during corona with lockdowns and restrictions, and there was a lot of reduced face-to-face time, which maybe can cause FOMO in people in general. And who doesn't know about FaceTime, the online pub quizzes that were held? There were a lot of active things going on social media to make people connect with each other. So there was more FOMO and there was more active social media use. So it's logical to assume that they also have correlation in that. So when you can look at more or deeper research that can be done on this, is that the motivation to actually engage in social media is pretty important in the explanation of these results. And that's what I would recommend. And finally, I will dive a bit into the important limitation of the study, and which is the educational level for participants. Because half of the participants in the study did gymnasium education, which is one of the highest in the Netherlands. But only the Dutch population are 90% doing this educational level. And higher education is also that you can have higher emotional intelligence. And you can regulate yourself in your emotions and have more insight into it. So higher emotional intelligence can also create less FOMO. So when you have when you're doing a lower educational level, it's also highly likely that you have more FOMO. So that could also be influencing the results of the study. So in short, social media use plays a big role in FOMO, and this study gives a really contradictory image, also because of the corona pandemic. So additional research is necessary in the motivation to use social media, but also the direction of the correlation between those is very important to prevent internalization of problems in adolescents and hopefully give them a better well-being. So thank you.